A Dutch ship rounds the headland of a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific. It is 1722, and the crew aboard Jacob Roggeveen's expedition are among the first Europeans to lay eyes on this place. What they see confuses them. The island is almost treeless. The soil looks thin, dry, wind-beaten, and yet, lining the coast, hundreds of massive stone figures stand with their backs to the sea, some weighing more than 80 tons, carved from a quarry over 15 kilometers away. The crew cannot square the landscape with the monuments. Too barren to sustain a major civilization, too monumental to have been built by a small one. That confusion became a question. And that question, over the next 3 centuries, hardened into an answer that almost everyone accepted. The answer was collapse. The story went like this. Polynesian settlers arrived sometime around 800 CE, maybe earlier. The population surged to 15,000, possibly 20,000. They cleared the island's palm forests to move those enormous statues. They burned through their resources. The soil eroded. Crops failed. And before Europeans ever arrived, the civilization that built the Moai had already destroyed itself. Jared Diamond made this narrative famous in his 2005 book, Collapse. He called Rapa Nui the clearest example of a society committing ecological suicide, ecocide, a cautionary tale for the modern world. And honestly, it was a compelling story. It had scale, it had hubris, it had a moral that felt urgent. It also had a problem. It was built on assumptions that almost no one thought to test with the right tools. The population estimates, for instance. Those numbers, the 15 to 20,000 figure that anchored the entire narrative, came primarily from archaeological surveys of rock gardens. Rapanui farmers used a technique called lithic mulching, breaking and scattering rocks across planting fields to retain moisture and nutrients in the thin volcanic soil. Researchers mapped patches of these rock gardens, measured their extent in sample areas, and then extrapolated across the island. The logic was simple. More rock gardens meant more food production, which meant more people. But here is where it starts to unravel. Those early surveys covered limited sections of the island. The extrapolation assumed that what researchers found in a few areas reflected conditions everywhere. Nobody had the tools to check the entire island at once, so the estimates held. They appeared in textbooks, documentaries, lectures. The number 15,000 became a fact through repetition, not verification. I went back and reread some of the original population estimates, and what struck me was not that they were careless. They were not. The researchers were working with what they had. What struck me was how confidently downstream authors treated those numbers. By the time Diamond wrote Collapse, the estimates had been cited so many times that questioning them felt almost contrarian. That is how assumptions calcify, not through bad science, but through unchecked inheritance. There were other cracks forming, though. Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, archaeologists who had spent years working on Rapa Nui, began publishing counter-arguments as early as 2006. They pointed out that the deforestation was likely driven in large part by Pacific rats, which the Polynesian settlers had brought with them. The rats ate palm seeds. The palms could not regenerate. The forest loss was real, but the mechanism was different from the ecotus story. And Hunt and Lipo argued the population was never as large as claimed. Still, the ecotus narrative had momentum. It was too useful, too dramatic, too morally satisfying to abandon easily. Then, in 2024, 2 separate lines of evidence converged, and together they did something that decades of debate had not managed to do. They made the collapse story structurally untenable. The first line came from space. Dylan Davis and a team including Gina Pacarati, a Rapanui researcher, pointed shortwave infrared satellite sensors at the island. Shortwave infrared imaging works by detecting wavelengths of light that are invisible to the human eye but interact differently with rock, soil, and vegetation. Disturbed ground, where ancient farmers broke and scattered volcanic stones across planting beds, reflects infrared energy in a distinct pattern. Feed those patterns into a machine learning model trained on confirmed rock garden sites, and you can scan an entire island in a way that no ground survey could ever replicate. This is the part that matters. Previous surveys had measured patches. This study measured everything. Every hectare, every slope, every windswept corner of the island's 164 square kilometers. For the first time, someone had a comprehensive view. What they found was stark. The rock gardens covered substantially less area than previous estimates had assumed. The agricultural infrastructure that supposedly fed 15,000 to 20,000 people was not there, not even close. The island's farming capacity had been dramatically overstated for decades. If you have been following this channel, you will recognize a pattern here. A foundational number gets established decades ago. It becomes load-bearing for an entire narrative, and then, when someone finally measures it properly, the whole framework shifts. This is one of those moments. And if this kind of deep dive into how science actually corrects itself is something you want to see more of, subscribing is the simplest way to make sure these stories keep reaching you. We have a piece coming soon on Polynesian navigation and the genetic trail it left across the Pacific. The second line of evidence went even deeper. Not into the soil, but into the bones. J. Victor Moreno Mayer and a team spanning institutions in Denmark, Switzerland, France, and Chile extracted and sequenced ancient DNA from 15 Rapanui individuals. The process is painstaking. You take a small sample, often from the petrous bone, the densest bone in the human skull, because it preserves DNA better than almost any other tissue. You work in a clean room to avoid contamination from modern DNA. You extract fragments, many of them shorter than 100 base pairs, damaged by centuries of tropical heat, and you sequence them. Millions of overlapping fragments, computationally reassembled into a picture of a person's entire genome. These were not modern samples. These were people who lived on the island between 1670 and 1950 CE, radiocarbon dated, whole genome sequenced at coverage ranging from 0.4 times to 25.6 times. Actually, let me back up for a second, because the coverage range matters. 0.4 times means you are reading each position in the genome less than once on average. At that level, you can still extract population-level patterns, ancestry proportions, and relatedness. 25.6 times means you are reading some positions over 25 times. That is high-quality data. The range across the 15 individuals means the team had both broad and deep signal to work with. Every single one of those 15 individuals was Polynesian in origin, most closely related, genetically, to present-day Rapanui people. That alone confirms something important. Population continuity. The people living on Rapa Nui today are descended from the same lineage that built the Moai. No replacement, no mysterious disappearance. But the team did not stop at ancestry. They reconstructed effective population size over time using a method that estimates how many breeding individuals existed in each generation based on patterns of genetic diversity. If a population crashes, a bottleneck, it leaves a very specific signature in the genome. Genetic diversity drops. Certain allele frequencies shift. Rare variants disappear. The signal is unmistakable. The team looked for that signal in the 1600s, the exact period when the ecocide model says the population collapsed. They ran extensive simulations to test various demographic scenarios against the genomic data. They did not find a bottleneck. Not in the 1600s. Not before European contact. The population history that best fit the data was one of slow, steady growth. A small founding population expanding gradually over centuries, never ballooning to 15,000, never crashing before the ships arrived. And yes, I know that sounds like it could be wishful reinterpretation, but the simulations were rigorous. The team explicitly tested the ecocide scenario, modeled a severe bottleneck during the proposed collapse window, and the genomic data rejected it. The genetic diversity in those ancient individuals was inconsistent with a population crash of that magnitude. What the evidence shows, taken together, is this. The Rapa Nui population was likely smaller than previously assumed throughout its history. The agricultural base was more limited than extrapolated surveys suggested. And the real demographic catastrophe, the devastating drop in population, came after European contact. The Peruvian slave raids of 1862 removed roughly 1,500 people from an island that may have never held more than a few thousand. Smallpox and tuberculosis followed. By 1877, approximately 111 people remained. What it rules out is the core mechanism of the ecocide theory. A pre-contact population explosion followed by self-inflicted environmental collapse. The DNA does not support it. The satellite data does not support it. The Moai were not monuments to a civilization tearing itself apart. They were the product of a society that, by every measurable genetic indicator, was stable. What it implies is that Rapa Nui was a story of resilience, not recklessness. A small population on one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth, sustaining itself for centuries in genuinely difficult conditions, building one of the most recognizable archaeological records in human history. But there is a second thread in this study that I think might end up being even more significant. All 15 ancient individuals, and modern Rapa Nui as well, carry approximately 10% Native American ancestry. 10%. And using a Bayesian approach that combined genetic and radiocarbon evidence, the team estimated this admixture event happened between roughly 1250 and 1430 CE. That is, before Europeans reached any part of the Pacific. This finding aligns with a 2020 study that detected Native American gene flow into other Polynesian populations. But the Rapa Nui data narrows the window and strengthens the case. Someone, at some point before Columbus, before Magellan, before any European knew the Pacific existed, made contact between South America and Polynesia. Whether Polynesians sailed east to the coast of what is now Chile or Peru and returned with South American companions, or South Americans sailed west on balsa rafts, or some combination of both, the DNA cannot yet distinguish. But the contact happened. It is written into the genomes of people who lived and died on this island centuries ago. This is a side note, but it is worth mentioning because it connects to a much older debate. Thor Heyerdahl sailed the Kon-Tiki raft from Peru to Polynesia in 1947 to prove that South Americans could have colonized the Pacific Islands. He was wrong about the direction of settlement. The Rapa Nui are definitively Polynesian, but the DNA now suggests he was not entirely wrong about contact. The irony is sharp. Now, I should be transparent about where the debate still sits. Not everyone is ready to fully retire the Akatis framework. Some researchers argue that even if the population numbers were overstated, there is real evidence of environmental stress, deforestation, soil depletion, loss of bird species that affected Rapa Nui quality of life before European arrival. The question is whether that stress constitutes a collapse or whether it represents the kind of environmental management challenge that many island societies navigated without catastrophic failure. I rewrote this section 3 times because the evidence genuinely pulls in 2 directions. The ecocide narrative in its strongest form, Diamond's version, appears to be wrong. But environmental degradation was real. The question is one of framing. Was Rapa Nui a society that destroyed itself, or a society that faced real constraints and adapted? The genomic evidence strongly favors the second reading, but it does not erase the environmental record. There is also the question of what happened to the connection with South America. 10% admixture is significant, but the mechanism, who traveled where, by what route, and whether it was a single event or multiple contacts, remains unresolved. The 1250 to 1430 CE window is wide. Future ancient DNA might narrow it further. Today, roughly 8,000 people live on Rapa Nui. Many are of Rapa Nui descent. The island is administered by Chile, over 3,700 kilometers away, and the relationship has never been simple. Land rights, cultural autonomy, and the repatriation of ancestral remains held in foreign museums are live, ongoing issues. This is where the DNA study does something that goes beyond academic debate. By demonstrating that the 15 ancient individuals are most closely related to present-day Rapa Nui, it provides genomic evidence that directly supports repatriation claims. These are not anonymous bones from a vanished people. They are ancestors of a living community. A community that, for decades, has been told a story about itself that centers failure and self-destruction. A cautionary tale imposed from outside. The genomes tell a different story. A people who crossed thousands of kilometers of open ocean, who made contact with another continent centuries before Europeans managed the same, who built monuments that have outlasted the civilizations that later tried to explain them. And who, despite slave raids, epidemics, and colonial administration, are still there. The ECI-Oside myth was never really about Rapa Nui. It was about us, about our anxieties projected onto a place most people will never visit. The DNA does not care about our anxieties. It just records what happened. And what happened was not a collapse. It was survival. I am curious, what other historical narratives do you think are overdue for this kind of genomic fact check?